Hey everyone, and welcome back to our webinar, Ask an Autistic, where you can come and ask autistic adults your questions, get them answered. They just can do a better job of helping you understand autism than I can. I can give you strategies to help your kid learn to talk, strategies to make mealtime more fun, whatever it is you need regarding behavior and language. That's my specialty, but the adults here are super amazing, and they're going to be answering your questions. We have Jeff Snyder back as a guest panelist tonight. He is amazing. He's been with us before. One of the things that also Jeff is putting together, we're going to be co-hosting is a roundtable to talk about what's going on with police in the world today regarding autism. Now, not to be antagonistic, we love everybody. We're inclusive in this group. We don't do any discrimination. And one of the things everyone here, I think, stands for in this group is that you cannot hold a group accountable for a person's actions. But we also know that there's work to be done with educating first responders about autism. There's been cases where autistic adults were arrested for doing something like stimming because of drug behavior. Certainly there's been cases of autistic adults having a gun pulled out on them because they were unable to follow instructions. So there's a lot we can do as a society to help to educate first responders, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So we don't have a date, but keep looking for that. The other thing to tell you, if you're watching this on YouTube, which most people do, welcome, we love you, thank you for doing that. We started this off as a one-time event. It is now a weekly event. It's going to be permanently a weekly event. You can head over to my website, hopeeducationservices.com. There's a brand new menu, little menu tab that says events, and this is listed. So you can register for this event. The link that you get will work every single week. We'll also remind you about the event moving forward. If you register, we'll resend you out that link every week. We can now have that set up since this is now going to be a recurring thing. So thank you so much for everyone who's on here live. Lisa is one of our favorite mommy guests. She's on here almost every week. We're really grateful for her. And she's also a mommy blogger. Her blog is Mama AF. We encourage you to check it out. And she has some questions for our panelists today. So I'm actually going to allow Lisa to ask her questions to our panelists. And Lisa's been here enough that she knows most of the panelists. And so I'm just going to put you in charge tonight, Lisa. You're going to have all the power tonight. And you're going to get to ask all your questions to whoever our panelists you want. And that's the power of coming on here live, is you just get the power. You get the control. I'd even make it wanted to share your screen.
Yay! No, thank you guys so much for always allowing me to ask my questions. So my question tonight has to do with autism acceptance and autism awareness. I had an interesting situation with my son's teacher earlier this year, and I just wanted to get your feedback on how to approach it and how I could approach situations like this moving forward. So back in March was Autism Awareness Month, and my son, he's 4.5, he's in the special ed preschool at the local school district, and our special ed class has been doing some push-in with the general ed TK class, because they're all about the same age, to get them included in the general ed. And so one of the sessions that the special ed teacher wanted to do was to, she and I have a good relationship. She wanted to use my son kind of as the spokesperson for the class. And their approach made me feel a little uncomfortable, but I understand the point of it. They wanted to teach the TK students about autism, what it is, how it can affect a person, and let them know that sometimes their friends on the playground are autistic. So they might have certain behaviors like stimming or certain ways of playing that might be a little bit different from how they might play. And I was asked by the teacher if they could bring my son up to the front of the TK class and say, Helen has autism. You have a friend who's autistic. Now we can all say that we have an autistic friend. So I understand the point of trying to bring awareness to autism. Not sure if I'm totally comfortable with that approach, but I wanted to get y'all's feedback on what might have been a more appropriate approach or suggestions that I can give the teachers when they're doing push-in to educate the other kids about autism?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that autism awareness and autism acceptance go hand in hand. And that there's a lot of division among professionals, among parents, among adults who are autistic. You know, there's like people think they have to combat. You have to be on one side or the other. Either you're for acceptance or you're for awareness. I think that you can't have either without having them together.
Yeah.
And one of the core values, I have 4 core values on my website. And one of them is acceptance and one of them is awareness. And I truly believe they go hand in hand. I don't think that was probably the best approach. It's not how I would have approached things, but I do think that their heart was in the right place, and that gives you a lot to work with. You know, you can kind of clean up strategies that don't work, but it's hard to change someone's heart. So that's the good news, is that their heart's in the right place. And I would love to hear from some of the people on our panel, our panelists, really, to answer this question, because I can't tell you how I would have felt because I'm not autistic, and that's what the power and beauty of this is. But the panelists can tell you what they would think and what they would have felt. So I'm going to go in order. Usually Michelle's first, but Aidan is on tonight first. So Aidan, you are first up tonight. What would you think, and what advice would you give about this?
Yeah, Lisa, I'll be honest with you. I think that you're being much nicer than I probably would have handled it if I was, let's say, a parent. I think they're out of their mind, and I'll tell you why. Look, their heart is in the right place, absolutely. And they didn't even, back then, years and years ago, people didn't even want to talk about what autism is. There were euphemisms. They would call kids spirited, or they'd call kids unique or theatrical. They'd say all these words and all these fluffs and not really address that the kid's autistic. So there's definitely progress that that they want to have the kids, learn more about what autism is exactly. But that's absolutely not the way to do it, and I'll tell you why that is. In my world, at least, here you have a young kid who I think really wants to make friends, as does everyone around that age, right? That is such a new and foreign concept to so many kids. I'm a big believer in educating at the very young age on certain things, because that will prepare them for the future. So, for example, a lot of times in late middle school, early high school, people start learning more about what the LGBT community is. And that's something that isn't always the greatest thing, because they don't have that knowledge at a younger age, and they can't draw their own conclusions. It's good to know about autism, but really using a child as a prop, the big question is, did they ask him if he was comfortable in doing that? That's the big question. And I guarantee you that they would do something probably random, where they'd plan it out and they'd say, hey, kid, so-and-so, could you come on up or whatever? I don't remember your son's name. I apologize for that. But, and then they would use him kind of as this. So this is a great example. So he has autism. And now you guys can say, that type of thinking is very alienating. And I find that to be very disrespectful, only because of the fact that he did not give his consent, in addition to the fact that that's not how I would do it. And the reason why you wouldn't do it is because I think it's a way to really just model and basically, like, I'll give you an example. And this is very extreme, but honestly, let's say this is an all-white school and everything like that, and you're learning about Black History Month, okay? And you say, all right, so-and-so, can you stand up? They happen to be African-American. They show up and say, so this is a great example. So we don't have a lot of African-American students in our school, that would open up to a huge lawsuit right there. You can't do that. And so that shouldn't be okay when it's a disability. It's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. Like, you're like, hey, look at me or whatever, like that. I find it to be weird and uncomfortable. So what I would do next time is I wouldn't use the kid as a prop. If the kid wants to talk about, which I don't think, I don't know if he would. I don't know how much he knows about some of the difficulties that he may have. But if you're in high school, like middle school, and you guys are doing something, you have to have it collaboratively together. You can't just bank on the kid being okay with it. He may say it's okay just to say, be a people pleaser. It could be a meltdown where they do it. It could be, he's like, I don't like people looking at me. So many things could go wrong, especially at that young age. So how I would do it is a great thing to do, storybook. where what you do is you have the teacher make up some story or find some book about an autism, maybe like an animal happened, like a cute bear or something like that. It's like a family has autism, do a story or something, because it's a pre-K, so they're young enough to do stories. Reading and doing that type of thing and not singling a kid out to potentially alienate the kid is something that could be a really great thing. Another thing would be doing a specific class activity where you get them. I know that I worked with one of the schools where you got bands where the kids wore bracelets in support of, it was Autism Awareness Month, and they kind of did an activity and they talked about what it meant and everything like that. And that way, if the kid, let's say the kid is in that particular environment and they happen to know that they have autism, they have the ability to say it on their own. It's like, yeah, guys, I'm autistic. Giving them that opportunity to own it themselves rather than having it forced to them is something that is so powerful. So there's a lot to uncover, and I'd be, if you ever need any advice on what to do with that type of thing, I'd be more than happy to help. And I know that they meant to do it in the right place. They weren't being malicious with it, but it's very damaging. And the example that I spoke about with kind of, the African-American kid and everything like that, it's really the same thing. It really is. So it's really, that's kind of the thinking I have on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that, Aidan. I was thinking while you were talking of that same example is like, what if like they had done that in the LGBT community and said like, this is a gay person and this is, it wouldn't make any sense.
Right? To me, I'm trying to be nicer, but really ridiculous. Really.
Like, there, the teacher would be fired. It would be probably making national news.
Yeah, I know.
So, but I think that the problem is, and I'm just going to be really blunt when I say this, is that especially at a very young age, people dehumanize people with disabilities. Yeah. The reality of it is that people look, as a society, we look at people that have a disability, especially a visible disability, and autism is often a visible disability when children are younger, as less than us. And we don't validate them as humans. We don't give them the same rights, because especially with autism, people think, well, they don't know, they don't feel, they don't know any better, they don't know any different, they don't understand, they're not socially aware, they don't even know what's happening. That's not true. Like, that's just not true. And if you're watching this and you don't know what autism is, like, that is not true. The end. Like, everyone here can tell you that, but like, stop listening to people that tell you like, oh, they don't even know any better. Like, stop, as a parent, as a teacher, stop talking about children like they don't understand you in front of them. They do. They get it. It's not okay. Like, it's not at all. I literally will not work with other therapists that do that. I will literally, I'm in collaboration is one of my other core values. If you disrespect a child that way, I won't work with you. It's not something I will do, because honestly, it means you're not a good human. I'm just going to be blunt. Like, if you're a professional and you're disregarding someone's feelings, you're not a good human. I'm not saying the teacher was not a good human and was disregarding their feelings. Probably genuinely didn't know any better, but professionals often know better. But in that context, Aidan, that totally makes a lot of sense. And I think it also brings up another topic, which I'd love to kind of maybe even do this. I have a feeling this is going to take the whole hour, so this might even be like a topic for next week, is the idea of consent. And what authority do parents have to consent on behalf of children? Now, as a parent, you have to consent for a child, right? Because they're a child. It doesn't matter whether they're autistic or they're neurotypical or they have Down syndrome or cerebral palsy, or it doesn't matter. They're kids. Kids can't make informed decisions, right? I have like one friend who she thinks it's up to her child if he has to get an injection if he wants it. So he's 4 and they went to the doctor and the 4-year-old didn't want the shot, so they left without it. She's like, well, he has power over his body. No, as a parent, like, as a child, like, sometimes you have to make decisions for your child, right? But there's a question over what type of consent a parent has, especially over social media. And in one of the discussions I actually saw on Instagram that I wanted to even talk about, doesn't have to be tonight, but at some point in this panel, is what level of consent does a parent have to share their children's journey or stories? So I have a lot of friends, because I'm in the professional community and I'm big on collaboration, of a lot of friends that are parents who are bloggers like you, Lisa. And this is something that you might be really interested in hearing the panel's opinion on consent. Like, to what level could parents share their journeys? Like, some parents I know will not share, they'll put everything with their child, but they use a different name. So that way, if their child grew up, it's not identifying to them. and some parents will only share the good things, you know. But like specifically, my question becomes, and I have an opinion on this, but you know, if a child has a meltdown, for example, and is like really, really struggling, and then as a parent, you record that meltdown, and then you put that meltdown on social media. So here's your child like super struggling and super having a meltdown, and now it's visible for the entire world to see for all of time. You know, is that, did I freeze up? Did you guys hear me? Or was
you were frozen there.
Okay. Here we go. So yeah, Jesse's saying he can't hold it back anymore. All right, so what was the last thing you guys heard me say? I guess it wasn't that interesting.
It was kind of cut off for me, so I couldn't like hear it well.
Okay, perfect. So it's talking about, well, my point was to talk about consent, and the idea is like, you know, I saw this thread on Instagram where people were discussing whether or not if a child's having a meltdown, and is it acceptable for a parent to put that on social media? And like there are parents who their kids will be having these tantrums and epic meltdowns, and they put it on social media. You know, I personally don't think a parent has the right to consent to that. And I think it's the same thing, is like, there's certain choices a parent has to make for a child. Whether a child though wants to go in front of a classroom and be singled out, I don't think it's appropriate for a parent to make that choice. It's only appropriate for the child to make that choice. And if the child's not old enough to consent to it, it's probably not an appropriate question to ask, is my personal opinion. So when the child, and like Aidan said, got to the age of consent, so to speak, where he could, yes, I want to do this, or no, I don't want to do it, then it changes everything, and it's just up to them. And then, like Aidan brought up, there is the question of, can they truly consent to it, or you know, are they just going to say yes to say yes? But yeah, exactly. So Michele, I know this is something I could tell you're really passionate about. So why don't you share your opinion about it?
Thanks, Jessica. And that is a really good question. It kind of ties in also with the consent thing in a way, because like as for your child, Lisa, I honestly, the way that they are trying to, like, they like Aidan said, like they meant it in the heart and stuff, but like to me, I didn't really think that would be a way that they would push that in. Like, especially, I definitely agree a lot about what Aidan has said, because like just like trying to do it like in the ways of activities where they're not like pointing it out about that your child, because there could be other people the other students that are living with autism that could be in the class too. So I don't know why they would just point out this one person. So I'd be like, in a way, like doing activities where they kind of like yeah, social stories, for example, incorporating social stories so they could explain like situations that go on in the environment that, you know, about with autism and stuff. And actually a little of a personal experience that I've gone through, which was in high school. I actually, my psychology teacher / peer leadership teacher, because I was in the peer leadership program in high school, and so my teacher was kind of trying to come up with a way to talk about autism, but this was a psychology class, so it's very different to what you're about with your son, but it was still like to the point about like we were trying to collaborate in the way where like I wasn't the only person, you know? So like, even though I did end up talking about it because I was trying to like kind of in a way like educate about with autism and stuff for the class and everything. But that's to the point about like with the whole consent thing. But anyway, it's just, the point is that I think the way that the teacher's doing it, like it was good at the heart, but I think like different activities with the social stories, incorporating all the students like in the class, like to know what the situations are like that goes on and everything. So like any way for the teachers to come up with situations that come up that, you know, that an individual with autism goes through, like, you know, like for example, like if let's say like you have a friend that's like that wants to give a hug or something, but sometimes like you gotta know the social cues to tell like if they're comfortable about that or not, and also to approach asking them too. So something like that, like any activities that evolve around with autism without pointing out specifically to just one child or involving the whole class. That would be my answer for that.
You know, Michelle, what I'm thinking about is, and then as a lot of people, probably everyone here I think knows already, that Aidan and I are putting together an anthology called This is Autism. The next project we do, and it might be kind of cool to do it as a group thing, is actually to put together a classroom curriculum for teachers to actually teach students about autism. So I don't know, any of the panelists, Jeff included, would you guys be interested in doing that as a project together?
I would come in for that.
Yeah, you guys
I'd come in for that.
Yeah, let's make that happen. So Lisa, looks like some good might come from that question. So
yeah, that was good. That was a really good question.
Yeah. And Lisa asked me, she's like, do you want me to give my questions? I said, no, this isn't about me. Like, this really, and I want you guys to know, this panel is not about me. This isn't about what I want. I mean, like, and I don't typically attract bad people because I'm not a bad person, but if like a bad human comes in here and says something inappropriate, there is a button where I can eject them. It's awesome. That's it. Then the end of it, he'll just go. But as long as you're a good person, then I'll just assume that the questions you ask are going to be good questions, and then that's what this is all about, is getting everyone's questions answered. So awesome. Thank you. Jesse, I could tell you are just like itching to share your opinion on this topic.
I'm just going over what I want to say, so I say close to the right things. But the thing is, I agree with Aidan, and quite frankly, I have a lot of mercy and sympathy for people who mean well or think they're doing something wonderful to make the child's life easier. I remember what I've gone through with good intentions, and even though the road to hell is supposedly paved with good intentions, my thoughts are, the teacher's heart was in the right place, and we should try to give her a break. But maybe there's a way to go about it that's going to be beneficial for the child and the parents and the class, because the child and his peers are going to get older, and over time they may see the child's differences as defective, and that child will be a huge target for bullying. So maybe they'll remember that presentation where the autism was presented as the child's superpower. I believe that any presentation should be geared toward the wants of the child. That child can be asked, what is it that you want out of this? What's going to make you happy? What things do you feel comfortable telling your classmates? And you kind of put the ball in the child's hands. But you're right. I think it was you, Aidan, who said that, no, actually it was you, Jessica, who said that you do not work with therapists who don't care or take the child's needs into consideration. And you're right, that can be extremely traumatic when a child is just going along for the ride and has no idea what's happening. I'm still having nightmares about my transition into mainstream school when I was in first grade from the special education classroom. I was going into a new class for part of the day, then more of the class in the future, and then finally I was out of the special education class, and no one cared or took into consideration my feelings at the time. And the child has to be, basically it depends on the child. Maybe the child wants their classmates to know that they have a special superpower, and just because one child is not comfortable, it does not mean that others have to suffer, I believe.
Yeah, Jesse, that's a really true opinion. And like I said, if the kid's okay with it, then totally good. But it is good to see that the teachers are trying to do something, because that didn't happen like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Certainly didn't when probably any of the adults were kids here. I mean, most teachers probably didn't know what autism was back when we were children. And realistically, today, most teachers are still not trained about autism at all. The number of hours, I think, in New York that a teacher has to have to get a master's degree to be trained in autism is, I think, 2 hours. And in some states, there's no requirement whatsoever. So a teacher could potentially, teach for 10 years and teach in general education and never even have someone who's autistic in their classroom and never studied it. So with obviously the autism rates being more prevalent, that's what we're trying to change, because education is how you change in society. You make a change. So thank you. Kevin, you are up on my panel next. What is your thought on this?
Well, I think I, for the most part, agree with, I definitely agree with what everyone has been saying so far about how no child, I think, should be forced to really talk about their disability and their autism if they're not comfortable with it. I think you definitely gotta really make sure the child is comfortable with it before you have them do anything, before you have them really do anything, with talking with their peers about their autism. And having said that, if the child is comfortable with it, I personally don't think it's a bad idea, because I think generally they are more likely to be accepted, and like peers are more likely to reach out to them. I think if it's explained to them, if they're educated on why and how they're different, I think the education has to focus on how the difference it's different. It's not less, not inferior, but different. And it's also teaching some self-advocacy skills at an early age, because I think we're fair or unfair, it's going to be a real uphill battle for pretty much anyone, but especially those of us who have autism, if we don't have those self-advocacy skills. And I'll say from my experience, while I wasn't really personally involved in doing it, I think I shared about my experience in education of generally feeling like I overall had decent peer relationships and was generally more accepted than not accepted, and the amount of bullying and teasing I experienced was pretty minimal, and I think that's largely because my peers were educated at an early age, and like as young as elementary school, about who I was and how I was different and why I was different, and the difference wasn't an inferiority. So, and yeah, I wasn't the one personally who really educated my peers. They had someone who was more of an expert on autism, educate my peers on how I was different. But I'd say if the child, him or herself, is comfortable with really being the one to educate their peers on how and why they're different, I don't think it's a bad idea. And like when you have a third party try to explain it to peers, sometimes the third party ends up speaking for the person, and it's like nobody really can speak for you but you. So I think teaching them that self-advocacy and how to speak and speaking for themselves, really is, I think, not a bad idea, provided the child is comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's agreed, Kevin. And that's a really big thing. I think everything we're talking about comes down to if it's the child's choice. And we know that different people have different personalities. And that's, I think, the thing that is really important to understand. And I'm at a young age very much for using things, and even Sesame Street has done a really good job lately of putting an autistic character in it. And we're seeing more autistic people being represented in media, which is a really good thing as well.
Yeah, and if I could just add one other thing I meant to say is there's so much of the emphasis has been trying to teach us how to really the rules of neurotypical social interaction, but it's nice to see there really being a movement towards as well, teaching neurotypicals the unique ways in which people with autism interact.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard because oftentimes we expect people who are autistic to not do things that make us uncomfortable as like people who are neurotypical. But the reality of it is that often we're asking someone to deny who they are. And it's really not our right to ask anybody to change to please us and to make us more comfortable. Someone shouldn't have to be uncomfortable to make you more comfortable. And I think it's important as a society that we recognize that, and as kids, like that it's taught that at a very young age. You know, as adults, we kind of intrinsically know that, and some people are willing to accept it and some people aren't. But kids need to be taught it, because there's this hard period for especially for teens and young adults that I think wouldn't need to happen if we were better about teaching kids. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Monica, is your internet working right now? I see that you're back. I see you're coming in and out. If your internet's working and you want to answer this, I see that you're with us at the moment.
So I live in the boonies, and normally I would go to my brother's house in our little tiny town where there's high speed, but I wasn't able to do that tonight. So I'm working with our HIC internet service. So to be honest, this situation is a little bit cringy for me. And like I get the teacher's motive is to be inclusive and educational, and like I understand that her heart is in the right place, but the whole idea of like outing someone as autistic is really uncomfortable for me. I'm 28 and I'm not even fully out, because the truth is that there's still stigma attached to being autistic, and the idea is still that I am less intelligent or less socially capable, or that it is inferior to being neurotypical, which that's what we're trying to battle out right now. And so when I develop a relationship with someone, I'll gladly tell them that I'm autistic once they know my character, once they know what I'm capable of. But I don't tell them I'm autistic first and then have them write me off, because that does happen still at 28. So I couldn't imagine in a school environment having someone else tell my peers that I'm not neurotypical, I'm separate from them. Something that he really wanted in order for me to want to do that for my own kid, and not in that way at all. So if she wants to just, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just checking, because your faces are frozen. So
You were coming in and
if
out.
the teacher wants, okay. If the teacher wants to educate the class, can you still hear me? Can you just give me thumbs up and thumbs down when you can hear me? If the teachers want to educate the class about some of your son's neurobiology or the way that he functions, I would suggest doing it like super broadly. Like someone else was talking about stories. That would be great. At least what they want about whether that's your son or not. And just, you know, this is what, these are some of the traits of the autistic community. They, like not every Black person has an afro, but lots of Black people do. But that's, like, autism is so huge that, like, I'm not like anybody else who is on this panel, and no one else on this panel. There's only 6 of us. So you can't really be like, this kid's autistic, and then that's their basis for every autistic human. I don't think that's fair to the kids, and I don't think it's fair to your kid. So I think to just have a conversation about neurodiversity is really healthy at every age. But to use like a kid as like a poster child for that is really uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is that you can't, like we talked about the police, is, well, we're not going to hold, in this group, we're not holding any one individual accountable for a group. I think it's also hard to assign individuals like these stereotypes, especially a group as diverse as autism. I really, and Lisa, we will include a list of children's hearing. That's a great idea. Thank you. I really appreciate appreciate that, guys. All right, so Rachel, you have not shared with us your opinion yet, and then we'll.
All right. Well, I was going to say that I really lean towards autism acceptance because awareness doesn't really get us anywhere but exploitation, which is kind of what happened to the kid here. At least that's what my opinion is, because awareness shines a light on all the things that we can't do, but acceptance shines a light on all the things that we can do. And that's what we need more of, is acceptance, and cross out the awareness, because that's just giving us a bad name. And as for the social stories, absolutely. One of the things that I really like to do with kids, since I used to work in a children's museum, we would have autism things all the time. I would say, well, here's an apple and here's an orange. They're both fruits, but they're different. What? Well, they're both fruits, but they're different. So that's it.
Yeah.
'Cause none of us are the same, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that traditionally the way that autism awareness was approached is, like you said, to highlight the differences, and to highlight the strengths. I do think personally, and you can tell me your opinion on this, that there does need to be those conversations for reasons like the fact that autistic adults have had a gun pulled out on them, have been arrested because they can't follow directions from a police officer. So from that perspective, there needs to be some sort of awareness as well. And, even just from the safety point of view, like awareness for firefighters to know that an autistic child may not cooperate in an emergency. So not that we want to focus on a person's differences, but there also does need to be education that a person may respond differently, especially in the context of those safety issues. I think that can be really important. What's your perspective on that?
Okay, well, I was going to say that's why we have all these problems with the police, because we're bringing awareness to all the bad things, and they think that we're bad. We're going to do this and that, and we can't stim when we feel like we need to. And I was going to say that a few years ago, I had problems with the police myself. He actually called me the R word because I was having a meltdown. And that's the problem, because there's awareness and not acceptance. And we're doing a good job trying to work with the police, but it's not enough. We need to do more. Society needs to do better, and acceptance is the only way.
Yeah, and I think that, like I said, I totally understand that, we're bringing the attention to the wrong things. I completely agree with that. I also, though, and my perspective is, and that knowledge is power, but knowledge is power through acceptance. Like, we have to, we want to accept someone for who they are, absolutely, 100%. There also does need to be, I think, some sort of degree of, for a teacher, as a teacher, you have to understand how an autistic child learns differently in order to teach them effectively. And that's not a teacher also needs to understand that a child that is autism is not any less than their peers. And the fact that they require a different learning approach doesn't make them any less than their peers. But if they don't understand how a child learns, they can't teach them effectively. And it's not just autism, right? It's about everyone. I think that more information and more bringing the idea, the fact that there's even a spectrum of diversity of neurology, I think is something that a lot of people don't know. And I feel like if people are aware of that, but taught to and accept it, and not being aware of it is taught to a person that's autistic does this, and that, and they can't do this, and that, that's not what I mean by awareness. I think awareness can maybe be replaced with understanding. And I think if you approach it that way, like understanding a person, because when you understand a person, it leads to empathy. Not empathy as in feeling bad for a person, but as in putting yourself from their perspective and being able to understand how they feel, and that allows you to accept and validate how they feel. And that's kind of how I approach awareness. It's not this idea of like everyone in the classroom has to have a list of traits that, you know, a child can't do, and that's not acceptable. Like the idea should not be like, oh, this is what autistic is, and autism, you know, he is autistic, so he can't talk and he can't do this, and that's not at all. You know what I mean by awareness personally? I mean an understanding of a person being validated for who they are as a person.
Absolutely. And I think that the teachers can do better by not singling the child out. And I think it's because we're shown one image of autism in the media so often, and they're saying this is what autism is. But if the kids got to know him more, then everyone would come together and they form their own perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lisa did tell me, she private messaged me in the chat saying that this did not happen for her son. She didn't consent to this. So this didn't, her son didn't have to go through this. So, and I'm sure she's really glad she said no after watching this video.
And I kind of figured that, which is why I felt okay with being as frank as I was. Like, I was really sure that you wouldn't do that to him.
Yeah, Lisa's an awesome mom. She wouldn't have said yes to that. But yeah, so I'm glad, and I'm glad to hear that too with what we've told you. And one of the things that you will always get here is like raw, real, honest answers. Like, I mean, I don't have a filter, just because I believe in authenticity, and like I want to be known as speaking the truth. You know, and I do that. I speak from my heart all the time. If you're kind of so worried about what you're going to say and offending people, you know, you're always going to offend someone. You can't please anyone, but then, you know, you're not going to get the real answers. And this is what this is about, is like real, honest conversations. If someone wants only something that's going to make them feel good, then there's other people that do that. I think Tony Robbins, or like Oprah, you can listen to his meditations, but that's not what this says. So Jeff is our guest panelist, and he's going to close us out tonight. And Jeff, I know, is like, he's like very wise. Jeff is like a lot of wisdom. I always listen when all the panelists talk, but I feel like Jeff is just like a very wise person. I'm really excited to hear your response.
Well, I mean, I would. One of the things that a lot of parents, I think, tend to you know, realize, tend to forget actually, is that they think they can bring their child, they could expose their child as they see fit. And that's a problem, because a lot of parents don't like being told how to raise their kids. And they'll think that if a kid is on the autism spectrum, then it's just a sideshow. And what we as a community need to understand is that kids with autism need to be differently than neurotypical people. And I agree with everything that's been said here with the teachers, with the social stories and the projects we're going to put into place. Because I think if we educate teachers and parents on how to, how we're trying to introduce the child to the students, fellow students, because if this is not done properly, then there's going to be consequences. And if we have consequences, then they're just going to ripple onto the next child. And I'm saying that because I'm an uncle of two nieces that live in Virginia, and they're going to go to school one day and be eyewitnesses to a child with autism in their class. So, being the good uncle that I am, one of the reasons why I do these videos is to also teach them about the people that they're going to be interacting with when they get older.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great perspective. And that's the thing we have to remember is that like kids grow up into adults. And, you know, I'd like to believe that honestly, if teachers did a better job when we were kids, we probably wouldn't have people burning buildings down right now. Like it's just, we have like understanding. We'll replace awareness and understanding because I really do like that word. Maybe I'll even go change it on my website. But understanding and acceptance of what makes a person, I think that's really what it comes down to. I think oftentimes we place extrinsic labels on a person, and then we want to define that person by their characteristics rather than who they are as a person. And I think, Jeff, that we need to do a better job as a society, not only in autism, but just understanding the humanness of everybody. And really that at the end of the day, whether or not you're autistic or whether or not you're neurotypical, whether or not you're part of the LGBT community, I probably spelled that wrong. It's a really long day. But whether or not, you're straight or whether or not you identify as straight or gay, whether or not, you are Black or white or Asian or you're living in the United States or Europe or anywhere else in the world, in Africa, that really what makes us a person is the same. And that really the emotions, the feelings, everything is 99.99% the same. And I think we need to focus on that as a society. And I think that a lot can change. And that I ultimately do believe that we'll get through this, everything we're going through as a society. I believe that love will triumph over evil all the time. And I'm a Christian, I believe, and not everybody here is, but I am. I believe we know the end of the story. That's it. God wins. Everyone else, and that's how it's going to be. And I do believe that whether or not you look at it as you don't have to believe in God, but I think that good will always win and good will always triumph. And I think that this is a big part of that and what we're trying to do and really just collectively making the world a better place. And I think everyone here is really playing an important role in that. And I just want to thank everyone for being here and for playing that role. So if you watch this whole video, this is our show, Ask an Autistic, real, honest conversations. Often they start in one place and in another place. That's usually my fault. But we meet every Tuesday, and you can register at hopeeducationservices.com if you want to join live and ask your questions.